the last stop. Pedro was a veteran city bus driver who knew every street in the city like the back of his hand. After 2 decades on the job, very little still surprised him during those long, early morning hours when he drove the empty bus back to the depot. Very little until a specific point on his route started defying all logic. Every night, right after his last run, Pedro followed the same route from downtown terminal to the company garage, crossing silent neighborhoods, deserted avenues, and industrial zones nearly swallowed by fog. The bus, without passengers, felt like a metal coffin in motion, cutting through the darkness with tired headlights. For weeks, the route went without incident until the bell rang. The sound was sharp, sudden, and piercing. The same chime any passenger makes when they pull the side cord requesting the next stop. Pedro immediately looked in the rearview mirror. The bus was empty, truly empty. No one had boarded since the final stop. No figure, no living soul. He assumed it was an electrical malfunction and continued driving, though a slight stiffness settled in his neck. The next night, at the same point on the route, a quiet curve between abandoned warehouses and an unlit plaza, the bell rang again. Same intensity, same sound, same place. Pedro began noticing a pattern. The chime happened always at that exact stretch of route, and only during return trips to the garage. During regular service hours, with passengers aboard, the bell never showed any malfunction or unusual behavior. It was as if something knew the right time to manifest. One night, before starting his route, he walked through every seat, personally checking the integrity of the call buttons, visible wiring, the control panel. Everything seemed normal. During the return to the garage, as he approached that cursed curve, he gripped the steering wheel tight and held his breath. The chime came precisely there. It sounded as if an invisible, determined hand had pulled the cord. More intrigued than frightened, Pedro began documenting the events. He recorded the stretch with his cell phone, both during passenger runs and solitary returns. In regular recordings, there was no sound, but in videos recorded after midnight, the bell appeared, clear, unexplainable, and in some of them, one more detail, a shadow in the window reflection, always near the back of the bus. A static figure, as if silently watching Pedro. Over time, other drivers started hearing the rumors. One of them, Marcus, asked to switch shifts with Pedro one early morning. He wanted to see for himself. On the return to the garage, he heard the chime too. He actually stopped the bus, opened the door, and walked to the back of the vehicle. No sign of presence, but something in the air was dense. A sudden cold, as if time inside had frozen. He never asked to drive that bus at night again. Pedro, despite growing fear, never failed to complete his route. Some early mornings, the sound wouldn't manifest. Others, it would ring twice, even 3 times. On one rainy night, while the windshield wipers fought against thick drops, the sound came accompanied by something new. The rear door opened by itself. The air inside became unbreathable for an instant, and then everything returned to normal. Door closed. Total silence. The company sent technicians to check the system. Nothing was found. No malfunction, short circuit, or interference. The bell worked perfectly, but only in the hands of the living. The exact spot where the phenomena occurred had been decades ago. The site of a tragic accident. A bus from the same company, packed with passengers, had fallen off a nearby embankment. 22 people died, including the driver. They say not all the bodies were found, and that some spirits never completed their journey. Today, Pedro still drives the same route, but whenever he approaches the curve, he slows down. And when the sound rings, yes, it still rings, he just closes his eyes for a second, takes a deep breath, and continues, without looking in the mirror. Not all rest in peace. Stay sharp, everyone. To all our amazing viewers and loyal subscribers, we know many of you watch our videos, but haven't subscribed yet. If you enjoy these stories and want to support this project, please hit subscribe, give the video a like, and share it. Now, enjoy what's coming up. The call that should never have happened. Rodrigo had worked as a night security guard for 8 years. He thought he knew every sound in the commercial building during the early hours, until he started receiving calls. They were from his mother, who had died 4 months ago, and who didn't want him to forget. It was a cold Wednesday in August. The Santana building was completely empty after 8 p.m., except for Rodrigo making his rounds. The echo of his footsteps through the dark corridors was the only sound that broke the heavy silence. At 3:11 a.m., the reception desk phone rang. The shrill sound cut through the quiet like a blade. The phone screen displayed unknown number. Rodrigo answered, expecting some prank call. Silence. Then, slow and labored breathing, like someone with lungs full of fluid. Then, a voice whispered, all too familiar, Rodrigo, why didn't you visit me at the hospital that day? It was his mother's voice, but distorted, as if coming from very far away, or from very deep. Why did you let me die alone? Rodrigo hung up, his hands trembling. He had missed the last day at the hospital because of an extra shift. He arrived an hour after she was gone. Guilt had been devouring him ever since. The calls started repeating. Always at 3:11. Always the same resentful voice. You chose money over me. I called for you, but you didn't come. Now, I'm the one who won't leave. Rodrigo stopped answering, but the phone kept ringing. 17 times per night, always stopping at the 18th attempt. A week later, he checked the phone company records. All the calls came from the same number. The number of room 237 at St. Luke's Hospital. The room where his mother had died alone. Rodrigo went to the hospital to confront whoever was doing this. Room 237 had been empty for months. They were doing electrical system renovations. There was no phone connected. When he returned to work that night, he found 23 missed calls, all from the same number. In the last record, a 4-minute voicemail, just the sound of someone breathing with difficulty and speaking repeatedly. You still owe me a visit. Rodrigo never answered the phone again. But the calls continue every night, always at 3:11 a.m. If you've ever abandoned someone in their final moments and started receiving unexplainable signs, share your story in the comments. Guilt has a peculiar way of finding its way back, especially when the dead refuse to forgive. Not all rest in peace. The last visitor at the wake. Beatrice had worked as a funeral home assistant for 15 years. She thought she'd seen everything, until the night a man walked into the wake of a woman named Lourdes. A man who had been dead for 50 years. Mrs. Lourdes' wake was taking place in room 3 of St. Peter's funeral home at 2:17 a.m. Only a few family members dozed in plastic chairs. The air hung heavy with the sickly sweet smell of wilting flowers, and the silence was broken only by soft snoring. Beatrice was making her security rounds when she saw the side door open. That door was always locked after 10 p.m. Always. But there stood a tall man wearing an old-fashioned black suit, walking toward the casket. His footsteps made no sound at all on the ceramic floor. The stranger stopped beside the casket and remained there, motionless, staring at Mrs. Lourdes' face. He didn't cry, didn't pray. He just watched. For 20 full minutes, Beatrice approached to offer coffee, but when she reached the spot, no one was there. The man had vanished. She checked every exit, nothing. Then she checked the cameras. The man appeared, entering, but never leaving. It was impossible. The next day, Beatrice contacted Mrs. Lourdes' family for information about her. They told her that Mrs. Lourdes had left only a few personal belongings, among them an old photo album. On the first page, a 1968 photograph. Young Mrs. Lourdes standing beside a tall man in a dark suit. It was exactly the same man from the wake. The handwritten note read, "My dear brother, Antonio, disappeared March 1972. Antonio was a teacher. During the military dictatorship, he began receiving threats. One night, he went out to buy bread and never returned. His body was never found. Mrs. Lurd spent 50 years waiting for him, whispering, "One day, he'll come home." 3 weeks later, Beatrice received a call from a colleague at the funeral home. The cameras had captured the same figure again, but this time at the cemetery, standing in front of Mrs. Lurd's grave. Mr. Santos, the funeral home owner, was visibly shaken. "In 40 years, I've never seen anything like it. It's as if he's still searching for her," he said. Beatrice requested a transfer to the day shift. Some things she learned should never be witnessed. If you work with the dead or have experienced something unexplainable during a wake, share your story in the comments. Not all rest in peace, and some never stop searching.